Hi guys, we are in Romans chapter 14. Today we're going to do the whole chapter. So after teaching the Christians about recurring debt to one another, Paul goes into some instructions on eating and observing days in Romans chapter 14. So he begins by warning Christians not to argue over opinions, especially with someone who is weak in the faith. What does he mean? So he goes on to talk about those who abstain from certain foods or set aside certain days in honor of the Lord. Now, we can see this today, even when we look at Lent, right? People are still doing this. They're still observing, Fridays, no meat and no meat for Lent. Some people do that. So they're doing that in honor of the Lord. So though Paul has already taught that all food is clean, and all days are alike, he leaves room for those who he refers to as weak in the faith regarding these restrictions or these types of restrictions. Though we know the gospel has set us free from the law, from ceremonial obligations and things of that nature, Paul allows for those who cannot yet leave behind or let go of long-held traditions. He's okay with that. He doesn't say, oh, you need to stop doing that, because they're doing it unto the Lord and according to their own conscience. So Paul tells the Christians to respect and honor each other instead of fighting over these types of matters. Even if they disagree on certain observances or fasts or days of the week to observe, he says, don't judge each other based on that. Judgment comes only from God. So if that guy over there wants to observe Fridays for Lent, or if this guy over here wants to observe Mondays for prayer, that's fine. That's according to their conscience and according to their faith. Now, those people should not be like, well, you have to do that too, or you're not a good Christian, or you're not really in the faith. Like that also, Paul doesn't want that. He says, don't fight, don't quarrel about this stuff. Judgment should not come from one another unless it's on a matter of sin, but not on matters secondary or tertiary to the gospel. So if someone believes something to be sin, Paul says, then to him it is. So if eating meat on Friday is a sin in your heart, in your mind, and you feel that, then to you it is. But that doesn't mean it is for everyone else. That's why he says weak in the faith. But everyone will bow before the Lord, not one another. And we will give an account of our deeds to him, not each other. So Paul says, not only should we not judge one another's sacrifices to God, neither should we flaunt our freedom in the presence of those who observe certain traditions or abstain from certain things. Paul makes the point that nothing is unclean in itself, but it is unclean for anyone who thinks it unclean. That's Romans 14:14. So he says, we are not practicing love for our brothers and sisters if we flaunt our freedom to eat and drink that which they have deemed for themselves unclean in front of them. So obviously, I'm not going to go to the fish fry and eat my steak. Like, that's obviously not loving. And it's just rude. So clearly, this is pretty common sense, right? But Christians do fight about this kind of stuff. So that's why he's giving this instruction. So it does seem on its face a little bit counterproductive, considering the great pains that Paul has just gone through a few chapters back, which we went through, to make sure these same people understood that physical circumcision pointed only to spiritual regeneration. Now, that was a big deal for these people, right? Circumcision was the membership, the covenant, back in the Old Testament, and they were so attached to that he had to teach them, like, no, it was only pointing to the greater spiritual reality of a regenerate heart, a circumcised heart. And that's exactly what he taught. And that's what we went through. But so why now this? It seems like, well, he was so strict on circumcision. What about this? Well, if you really look at it, though, Paul never taught them not to be circumcised. He taught that circumcision is really of no matter. It has nothing to do with your spirituality. As prior, you had to be circumcised, right? You were to be part of the family. That's what you did. But it wasn't like that in the New Testament. So as he says in 1 Corinthians 7, 18 and 19, he says this, was anyone at the time of his call already circumcised? Let him not seek to remove the marks of circumcision. Was anyone at the time of his call uncircumcised? Let him not seek circumcision. For neither circumcision counts for anything nor uncircumcision, but keeping the commandments of God. So basically, it's a moot point. It's a non-issue. If you're circumcised, stay circumcised. If you're not circumcised, then you're not. It doesn't matter, right? So it's on the same line of thinking that we're talking about this. So he says, what does he say? But keeping the commandments of God. That's what matters. And what did he just teach us in the last chapter, in Romans chapter 13, that loving one another is the fulfillment of all the commands. So love is what we're after in all circumstances, even when there's disagreement upon traditions. Paul's pointing at something greater while teaching them not to fight about personal preferences. Basically, he says, do what you want as much as it pertains to your faith in your tradition, but don't fight. You're both right. Whether you do or you don't, you're both right. Just love each other despite your differences. Instead, pursue what makes for peace. The kingdom of God is not about food. It's not about days, right? So don't destroy what we're building by faith for disagreements about food or days, because that's not what matters. So he says, do not, for the sake of food, destroy the work of God. Everything is indeed clean, but it is wrong for anyone to make another stumble by what he eats. It is good not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything that causes your brother to stumble. So that's Romans 14, 20 through 21. So don't pass judgment on yourself, or don't pass judgment on other people. Pass judgment on yourself alone. Have faith and don't doubt your convictions, right? It's pretty simple. Hope that's helpful. Tomorrow we'll look at romans chapter 15, and we're coming to a close here. We've got 2 more chapters and we'll be all done. So I hope the study was helpful, and have a good day.